Do these genetically modified gray wolves or direwolves, do they have souls? This company works on a lot of other stuff too. Do you think that they are cloning humans? Is this ethically right?
And I'm into animals. That's why this is so interesting to me. They're looking at using this technology to hopefully alter some frog species so that others don't go extinct.
From that fungus?
From that fungus.
Funguses can be brutal.
They are brutal.
They're fun to eat, but dang. And a lot of, like they're tasty, and they can also be very fun. And you can have some, like, magical, soul-changing experiences. But at the same time, some of them are mean. Like, howdy. Well, Russ here.
And Chris, maybe all of you have heard that Colossal Biosciences has brought back or de-extinct the direwolf. It's probably questionable whether that is the truth or not, but they have created an animal that is not a gray wolf. It has genes from a direwolf, which that species went extinct 10,000 years plus ago. But it's interesting that this is happening. The bigger part of it is getting a lot of attention for Colossal Biosciences. It was a good publicity thing for them to do this species. I didn't even know that anyone was working on bringing back the direwolf. I knew that they were working in other groups on bringing back the woolly mammoth and the dodo bird and the thylacine. There's been talk of bringing back the Carolina parakeet and the passenger pigeon. I'm interested in this. I have a bit of a science background, nothing super deep. I'm excited about this.
Okay, before we get into the ethics part of it, they are cute. I mean,
The little direwolves are cute right now. They might be monstrous later.
But are they really direwolves? I know you kind of mentioned it, but like, are they really direwolves? They seem more like gray wolves with some direwolf genes.
And that's really what they are. I mean, because they did not exactly copy a full, from what I understand, direwolf genome and stick that genome into an egg and then grow that fetus out. They took genes and spliced them using the CRISPR technique into gray wolf genetics, and then those viable embryos, they grew up inside a dog surrogate because dogs descended genetically from gray wolves.
How'd they get the genes from the direwolf? It was from a tooth?
Yeah, so most of the direwolf skeletons, from what I understand, are from La Brea tar pits, which is highly acidic and hot. And that totally just destroys the genetic. But they did find through international museums a direwolf tooth that was, I think they said like 11,000 years old, 13,000 years old, something like that. They got some genetics from a direwolf from that. And then from a skeleton, a skull of another direwolf that was like 73,000 years old. They got from a little bone in the ear that is, I guess, really well protected in there or something and develops early, and they got more genetics out of that.
It doesn't really sound like they were able to get that many genes. It sounds like they were able to manipulate the gray wolf to look a little bit more like the direwolf through morphology, but maybe from a genetic point. How would we even know? Unless you had like an actual living direwolf, how would you know if it was the same thing you created?
I don't know that you really would.
It just seems kind of gimmicky, like maybe a tactic to get publicity. Not that it's all bad.
No,
it's interesting.
It's pretty cool.
But then it goes into the ethics. Is this ethically right? Even though it's hard to know because like people might be okay with genetically modifying food, for agriculture,
which I'm not,
and then they're like, oh, that's okay, but we can't play God with these direwolves. So people are hypocritical. It's just like, should we be genetically modifying living animals and creatures and plants? Should we be doing that? Is that ethically right? And then the other question is, which I believe dogs have a soul, do these genetically modified gray wolves or direwolves, do they have souls?
Well, they're walking around.
They sure seem cute.
Yeah, and so if you believe that a dog has a soul, like you believe a human has a soul.
I think at least, I don't know. It seems like we have a soul. I want a soul. I want a soul.
Boy, we could go down so many different paths with this because, I watch a lot of NDE videos and I have my views on what a human is. I think we're kind of like something else other within a body. These are avatars. All these things that we've been watching in movies and seeing on TV or what have you, that's really more what reality is, except we think that it's...
What do you mean though by what things?
We think
what things?
we think it's sci-fi.
Oh, okay.
What we are seeing as science fiction, and what have we been seeing as science fiction for decades, turns out to kind of be what reality
Some of it, you mean?
is.
Some
A
of it?
lot of it.
But it's so vague because there's so much science fiction that I don't know
I
exactly
know,
what you're talking about.
but there are different aspects of science fiction that we've seen, through Star Trek that, now it's just like every day.
That's so vague, but I get it.
It is very vague, but how deep can we go in a 3-minute, 4-minute, 15-minute video?
So should humans be doing this? I guess that's why some religions go so extreme to where they just think that humans should not manipulate life at all, including like when someone gets sick, it's like, nope, you can't give them a transplant, or you can't go on certain medications or whatnot because we don't want to play God.
Can't give a transfusion of blood even though it's almost assuredly going to
And-
save the person.
And why did I bring that up? Because I could see that those people, most likely...
Oh, they're going to hate this.
They're not going to like manipulating genes in a wolf. They look like domesticated gray wolves, and maybe that's what they are with a few genes that they put in there from another species, which does that have unintended consequences? Like, it's hard to tell, like, are they viable? Can they reproduce now? They might not do it, but can they reproduce? Can they have an offspring?
I think they should let them try.
And then the other question is, how long are they going to live? Are they going to have some sort of genetic problem in the future? It's hard to know. And like there's genes for the looks, but there's genes you have that affect your behavior. Are these new direwolves, are they acting the same as the prehistoric direwolf?
And we would have absolutely no way to even know that because there's no one that saw a direwolf prehistorically.
What's the company called though?
Colossus.
Colossus.
Biogenet.
Apparently this company works on a lot of other stuff too. So this might be like a way to like promote their company, be like, hey, we're doing this exotic stuff, but like we also do all this other stuff, like we're working with endangered animals and whatnot.
That's exactly what this is in a way, and they're showing what they can do, and they are. I watched some other videos. They've got a YouTube channel out there with a lot of videos. One of the big things they're working on is the cryptid fungus, which is making amphibians, the frogs around the world, go extinct. So that was interesting for me to find out because back in 1984, I got a chance to go with a biology class to Monteverde in Costa Rica, and we got to see a dozen golden toads, which was like this incredible toad that only occurred along the top of the mountain range there on the Continental Divide for a 1-mile stretch. And there are thousands of these toads. The male is bright golden and the female is more kind of like patterned, maybe like a giraffe would be with gold in between the spots. But we got to see like a dozen of these things. That was incredible. I have a photo somewhere of one of the golden toad males that I saw. It turns out that year was the last year that people saw a lot of golden toads. The next year, the whole year, 8 were seen. The following year, 1.
Because
and
of
then
the
they
fungus?
were extinct. And it was the first toad species, first amphibian to go extinct that brought on the knowledge of there's something happening to amphibians.
Ah.
And so it's, God. Okay, so I'm excited about this. It's part of why I'm so interested in this. I got to see a species right before it went extinct. And I'm into animals. That's why this is so interesting to me. They're looking at using this technology to hopefully alter some frog species so that others don't go extinct.
From that fungus?
From that fungus. I forget how many species of amphibians worldwide now have gone extinct. They've determined it's from this cryptid fungus, which is on African clawed frogs. And African clawed frogs apparently live with cryptid fungus. It's not a big deal for them. Ironically, studying amphibians, it's very likely that those that are most interested in amphibians were the ones that transmitted the fungus around. Not knowing it existed, not knowing it was in their tanks, in what they're working with in the labs and what have you.
Wow.
And then as they go and study amphibians around the world, they're herpetologists. They're transferring this cryptid fungus that people didn't even know existed, exposing all the animals, and amphibians started plummeting.
Unintended consequences.
Unintended consequences.
Somebody who loves frogs
Yeah.
spreads a fungus to frogs because they've been in contact with the frogs that have been infected. And that makes me think, even though you have hope for this company or other companies like it to keep animals from going extinct or to bring back animals that are extinct, what about the unintended consequences?
Well, there.
Can you really do this? I'm just wondering because it's a big question mark. I'm just saying, and there is a risk. There's good that good can happen, but there is a risk. What if something goes south?
Yeah.
Like a Jurassic Park.
Well,
that's an extreme.
We
I'm
won't
just
know
saying.
until we go down one of those roads. But there's another good example of this same type of thing happening right now.
Wait, can
You've
I
heard of?
clarify the frog thing?
Okay.
So they're trying to manipulate the DNA in the frogs so they're more resistant to the fungus?
Yes.
Is it the same company?
It's the same company.
Oh, this company is doing the frog.
This company.
Okay.
Yeah.
I wasn't sure on that because there's other companies.
So that's their big thing, they say, is trying to come up with ways to protect the species that still exist. This is a lot of work because that would be gene manipulation and introducing genetics that are resistant to the critid fungus into numerous species of frogs. It's not just like trying to save one species of frogs.
This is starting to sound like Monsanto, though. Trying to put genes in corn that make them resistant to something.
Exactly, and I'm not for what Monsanto does.
I'm just saying I'm just calling a spade, Chris.
Well, this is controversial. Why I don't care for what Monsanto's doing is they are taking a gene from an organism that produces a toxin that is a toxin to butterfly and moth larvae. Because have you ever opened up corn and found a larva inside? The corn worm? Have you ever seen that?
No, but I've seen it. I've seen it in pictures.
So I grew up raising gardens, with my grandmother.
You got to remember, our food supply is tainted. 90% of corn in the U.S. is tainted with Monsanto corn. So it probably doesn't have that issue. You're not going to find because if you open up the corn, isn't it killed?
The corn that you would grow in your garden, you can still, if you're lucky, find a corn worm probably in there. Because you cannot buy genetically engineered corn seeds off a shelf. I found this out the other day. You can find heirloom corn seeds, thank goodness, and hybrid varieties of corn. They're all corn. They're not something other than corn. But the corn seeds that Monsanto have developed, they took, and I should know what it is, if it's a fungus, if it's a bacteria or whatever, I can't remember. And they put that gene that is deadly to larvae of moths and butterflies into the corn. So when the corn plant grows out, every single cell of that corn plant has that toxin in it, including the pollen. So that's very likely one of the things that's really wiping out butterflies and moths is this pollen blows around. Corn is open pollinated. The pollen just goes everywhere. It's not pollinated by bees. When that gets on butterfly larvae and moths, wherever, it has a possibility of killing the butterflies and moths. I'm against that because then we're also eating genetically modified corn that has this pesticide basically in every cell of the corn that we're eating. What does it do to humans' biology? We don't know. I certainly don't know. I don't want to eat it, so that's why I look on all the corn products that I buy. So I don't care for that genetically engineering there. And I don't care for what Monsanto is doing with Roundup because they take genes that make a plant resistant to Roundup so that you can put it in the crop and then spray the crop with more and more Roundup. And then it kills the weeds.
Roundup ready?
Roundup
That's
ready.
what they call that?
Yeah, and it doesn't kill the agricultural crop that you're growing. You've got that Roundup so heavily exposed on everything that then we're eating. What is that doing to us? So I don't like genetic engineering for that purpose.
Okay. For trying to bring back or trying to make frogs more resistant to fungus. You might believe in that.
Yes. So here's the other example. The one until now, genetic engineering that I felt like I've supported. It was done by a company or really a nonprofit group, the American Chestnut Foundation. One of the things they've got people working on is they've taken a gene out of wheat. That gene in wheat keeps oxalic acid crystals from forming. They've taken that gene and put into the genetics of American chestnut. Now, the American chestnut was the more dominant species of trees in the eastern forest in eastern North America. They are thinking that maybe 1 out of every 4 standing trees in the forest was an American chestnut tree.
In the southeast?
In the southeast. And now there's just sprouts coming up from old roots, because what happens with the fungus that affects the American chestnut, and it came on Chinese chestnuts being brought in and planted here. Chinese chestnuts are resistant. They can live with the fungus. But what the fungus does is make a kind of a big scar on the trees. It makes oxalic acid crystals form. Those oxalic acid crystals pierce the cell wall in the stem of plants. When that scar goes all the way around a stem or a trunk, then it cuts out nutrients from being transported in the plant. It girdles the tree. It's the same as if you took a saw and went around the whole phloem of the tree. You've killed the phloem around the whole stem, and then it dies. So
Funguses can be brutal.
they are brutal.
They're fun to eat, but dang. And a lot of, like they're tasty, and they can also be very fun. And you can have some, like, magical, soul-changing experiences. But at the same time, some of them are mean. Like,
Yeah, and I hope I'm right, because it's been a long time. I think it's a fungus for that.
well, I'll double check, but
Yeah, I've been supportive of this genetic engineering to bring back this important keystone species in the eastern forest. And it's not a gene that's in there that's being put in to kill something else. It's just to keep an oxalic crystal from forming
Okay.
and piercing the cell. So it doesn't sound like it would be super dangerous. It's not killing off anything.
yeah.
It doesn't even kill the fungus. It just keeps the fungus from being able to form oxalic acid crystals. And since most everyone eats wheat, unless you're celiac, I don't see that that's something that would be in a food chain supply that's really going to impact us. Because, if we found out that that gene would keep someone that can't eat wheat from not being able to eat a seed off of American chestnut. Well, no one's eating seeds off of American chestnuts right now.
Yeah, that's just...
Because they're not there anymore.
Yeah, but, like, there's someone's allergic to everything.
And I've been super, super excited when I heard that there's different companies. I'd never even heard of Colossus before this happened. I knew that there was a Japanese company, don't know their name, that was trying to bring back the woolly mammoth. And that...
They couldn't find viable DNA?
Well...
Was that right? It was too frozen? too
Actually,
broken
they have
down?
some pretty good genetics from woolly mammoths because they've been buried in permafrost. They've got better genetics on woolly mammoths than they do on a dire wolf, by far. So I've been excited about that because I feel like, if humans sent animals into extinction, then if we could correct a mistake, then we should try to correct the mistake.
Okay. This is something I almost forgot to say. I had heard that if somebody carries the cystic fibrosis gene, they will they can do like some sort of genetically modifying to make sure your child doesn't have cystic fibrosis. I don't know exactly how it's done, and I'm not even sure if that's correct.
CRISPR.
Oh, it is? So humans are already somewhat genetically modified,
It sounds like we're doing
and that is a disease that you would not want your child to have. You don't want your child to have cystic fibrosis. You wouldn't want that. No. And then the other thing is, do you think that they are cloning humans?
I don't know. I have not heard of
I think it's a
anyone cloning
yes.
him. But it would not surprise me.
And why do I think
would
this?
be surprised if someone hasn't and we just don't know about it.
Think of all the brutality in the world. People do some brutal things to people. You don't think someone in the world has the technology and is choosing to clone a human? It's happened. It's happened in some deep lab. If it wasn't in the US, it was in China or Russia or some other place. Is it morally right? That's another thing. And do they have a soul? That gets very complex. Because some people, what is a soul anyways? Okay.
Exactly. If we are biological computers, if we are living machines, and you were to accept that then souls pop in to these living machines at some point, is one that's been altered? Can a soul pop into that if there is a soul, depending on what you believe?
Does God collaborate with humans to put a soul? This
is such a crazy video. We're going to be opening up so many topics.
To be real,
here.
You're talking about cloning, and then there's always going to be people who are talking about the ethics. So it's not really that crazy that we're messing around and does a clone have a soul?
But we're opening up so many topics here that we're going nowhere with. I feel deprived. I feel like it was terrible that we wiped out the most numerous bird, it's thought, on the planet in just a few years. the passenger pigeon. And then the Carolina parakeet, which was the most northern parrot in the world, inhabited the eastern United States. Those were intentionally killed because they ate crops, and people didn't want them eating their crops. They didn't see another way to get rid of them, and they just slaughtered them. You injure one parrot, the others come down to help it, and they could just club them to death. We've not been able to see Carolina parakeets in the wild or passenger pigeons, and dodos were wiped out on Mauritius. You know, there's people that arrived there on ships. Dodos were easy to club. They just clubbed them and ate them all. But there's genetics of those. And since we forced those species into extinction, I really love the idea of maybe using something of the CRISPR technology and maybe bringing these species or something that functions like them back into existence. That's what I'm interested in.
Yeah, I don't know if you can ever really create the same species. I think there's so many genes. I think you have millions of genes. It's hard to really ever know if you would actually bring back a species that is extinct.
And you wouldn't bring back the exact genetics in this instance, as far as I can tell, but you might bring back the function of those species to the ecosystem.
Then you have to ask, is that function even needed anymore with how screwed up everything is? The balance. Do they have enough food to eat if we've wiped out some of their native habitat to grow food?
Well, there's a connection between the passenger pigeon and the American chestnut, because it's thought that maybe a big part of the food supply for the passenger pigeon was American chestnut, which does not exist in the wild now, except that the American Chestnut Foundation is planting some of those genetically modified, genetically engineered trees back into old mining areas, really trying to reclaim mining areas in a big way. The other version of that they did, which was just like we hybridize things without genetic engineering, but crossing Chinese chestnuts with American chestnuts and backbreeding and backbreeding and backbreeding until they get to where there's 99% American chestnut genes in a plant that has the ability to resist the fungus, and then plant those seedlings back in. Are they absolutely 100% American chestnuts? No, but they're morphological functioning within the environment is what they are trying to do. So trying to keep ecosystems intact with all the parts, at least pseudo parts, so the things are functioning. So that's more of what I'm interested in. I just wish we would just quit building out everywhere and putting everything under foundations and plowing up prairies and destroying the environment. There's so little of it left intact, rather than trying to squeeze every frickin' dollar out of every inch of soil and then depleting the soil and seeing it wash away. What we're doing to the planet is despicable. Do we deserve such an incredible planet? I don't know that we do.
The question is, what do you all think of cloning a gray wolf with some direwolf genes? What do you all think? Do you think it's really a direwolf? Do you think it's morally correct to do this, to play God? Let us know. Make sure to like this video. If you're not subscribed, feel free to subscribe. We want our subscribers to go up. Why, Russ?
And Chris,
Love you.
howling away here. I'm for it.